When I was reading Karl Barth as a young college student and graduate student, I really imbibed this idea that the great threat was this Promethean arrogance of modern man. You know, the Enlightenment, think for yourself, we're going to do this all under our own steam. And so the Promethean man reaches like the Tower of Babel to try to make a god of himself. And as I taught in the 90s and into the aughts, I looked at my students and I did not see overweening arrogance or Promethean vain ambition. Instead, I saw a kind of self-protective impulse, a tendency to go small and to avoid risk. And so I began to see that really it's the materialist, and I mean that in the metaphysical sense, not in the moral sense, that we're nothing but our DNA, or nothing but our self-interest, or we're nothing but our selfish genes, that this is actually the greater threat than, you know, Jean-Paul Sartre and French existentialism of the 1950s, or for that matter, you know, Jack Kerouac and a beatnik, you know, Dionysian quest for perfect fulfillment. So a lot of the cliches of the 60s were Promethean, I think. Be all that you can be. And whereas I look at our time, and I think it's a sign of how false that promise was, that the actual upshot has been a culture where people try to minimize risk in their lives. We see this with love and marriage. Young people are very anxious. They see romance as a minefield. You have to be very carefully navigate that minefield. And your career, you've got to carefully manage that minefield. Or nowadays with social media and political correctness and getting canceled, your own private thoughts you have to carefully monitor and only express in controlled, protective environments. What really drove this home to me was, again, it's very important. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I do try to pay attention to what people say. And what really brought me up short was this call for safe spaces. It emerged first at elite universities. So these are the most successful young people in our society, potentially. They have the world open before them. They're likely to be very successful in life. But they're calling for safe spaces. And that needs to be taken seriously. It's not a cynical, I don't think it's a cynical, I think it's heartfelt. So what kind of society have we created? Can you imagine what it feels like to be less talented? You have less career prospects than somebody at Yale or Harvard? They're even more under assault, it seems to me. Or they feel even more vulnerable, even more at sea, treading water, trying to keep their head above water. And so this strikes me as the greatest threat we face now, is the feeling that there's nothing out there that's solid, that I can rely on, that I can stand upon. There's nothing really worth striving for, giving myself to, loving, being loyal to.